Sweet Dream Wreath is what I'm going to show you today. I'm growing hops and lavender in my garden, and these are two main ingredients in Dream Pillow potpourri, and it's got a nice texture to it. It's got a nice color as it dries, and I think it'll be easy and fun for you to try to make. We're going to go with 3 ingredients. We have our grapevine wreath base. I find if you purchase it, it's a lot less stressful than trying to make grapevine wreath bases. If you've ever made them, they're a lot harder to make than it looks. The other ingredient is lavender. You can use fresh lavender or you can use dried lavender. I'm using dried lavender today because I happen to have it around. If you use fresh lavender, you're going to want to cut the stems quite long to work with. The dried lavender, we're going to divide this, so it's a good, if you look at it, about an open fistful of that right here is about how much lavender to use. The hops we're going to use, I grow hops just because I like the texture on the trellis. This hops is a perennial, so it comes back every year, completely dies down, and then comes back in the spring. I like the texture of the leaves. They're kind of almost like a grape leaf. And then the hops flowers have a great look to them, and they'll turn like an amber color as they age. Right now they got a great kind of that green that's so fashionable right now. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our grapevine wreath and lay it in front of us. We're going to take our lavender, and I'm going to divide it into 3 sections. And it's going to be messy, that's okay. I'm going to work with one and set the other 2 down for right now. I sort of like it the way this is because not all the heads are exactly the same, evenly I should say. But I'm going to take this, and I've got some florist wire. You could use anything if you wanted. You could use a string, but I cut about a yard with my scissors. And I'm going to take and I'm going to wire this lavender, and I'm going to try to wire it up close to the flower head so that if I need to cut it, which I will, I can have all this space down here that I won't be in the way of the wire. You just need to twist it a couple times. It's just going to hold the lavender securely. And leave the little legs or the arms or the strands out long, because that's what you're going to tie it to the wreath with. I'm going to go ahead and cut the lavender legs off here. And I like these even on this wreath. Again, it's a personal preference thing. If you want to leave them uneven, that's fine. And then I have some raffia. You could use real pretty ribbon if you wanted to, but I like the look of raffia because it's kind of wispy and wild. It goes along with the theme sort of this wreath. With the raffia, I'm going to wrap it around a couple times, and then I'm just going to simply tie it. I'm not going to bow it, just a simple tie. And you want to tie it again so that it doesn't come undone. Now, whenever you do a wreath, you have to keep in mind that you want the wreath to look nice and round as you work with it, but you have to throw it out of your head what the end is going to look like. In other words, that's confusing how I'm saying it, but even though you want it to look like this when you're done, you're going to line this up right on the wreath, so that it has a nice, because the next bunch you put is going to be right here, and the next one's going to be right here, so as it'll work its way around the wreath. So turn your wire upside down on the back of the wreath and wire it. And you can snip it off and just tuck it in the back of this wreath. It won't hurt anything. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do all 3 of those like that. If you've never grown lavender at home in your garden, it's something you should give a try. There's a couple things you need to remember about growing lavender. Lavender likes well-drained soil, and if you think about it, it's a native to the Mediterranean, where the soil is more gravelly than here in Tennessee. So if you want to grow lavender, there's one of the main things to remember is, I'm going to do this last bundle of lavender here, is to not mulch right directly underneath the lavender because it likes well-drained soil, and that will harbor moisture. And lots of times people say, I can't grow lavender, it always rots off, and lots of times it's because they have mulched right up next to the plant, and the plant can't have enough air circulation. There's several, actually not several, there's lots of varieties of lavender to grow. Lots of times people will plant lavender and they'll say, well, it didn't winter over, and that's because you didn't have the right variety. I find the best variety for this area is Munstead. Munstead almost becomes a shrub. It becomes quite large, and it is really a woody ornamental like shrubs. So if you think of terms of lavender that way, it makes more sense in their growing habits. The Munstead is my favorite to grow for wintering over. Hidcote is another one of my favorites. It's a little less hardy than the Munstead, but I will have to say it's probably one of the most fragrant lavenders there are. There's lots of new varieties since they've been starting more lavenders. There's Goodwin's Creek, there's Provence, there's just thousands of them. There's Lavender Lady that came out in the late, I guess it was the late 70s, that was supposed to be the savior for southern gardens because you could grow it directly from seed into your garden, and it does work, and I have had some for about 7 years. I just find that it's more of a front of the border thing just because it's more low growing. The lavender, I find people will prune it too quickly in the spring. It's actually the last thing I prune in my garden. I wait till it all greens up, and then I go back in and I cut out the dead wood, and I can reshape it at that time. Okay, we got the last bundle done here. And again, we're going to wire this here. And again, we're going to switch our wreath around a little bit, and you can just tuck this. You know what? I'm going to cut this just a tad shorter because I think it's a little too long right there. Hope there's nobody sitting behind you because I'll get whipped with that as it's flinging out of my scissors. Okay. Slide that up just a little bit. Okay. And again, we're going to wire this to the back. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the raffia just because it's just a little bit too long on some of them. And I like the wispy look, but I just don't like it quite that long. So we'll tuck that wire in back there. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go back and just cut that a little bit. And you don't have to measure. It's not important. There's too many other things in life that's got to be just right. Wreaths are not one of them. Okay, we're going to use our hops. And as making these wreaths, I've discovered a couple things. If you're making just a hops wreath, you could take these long trendles here and you could just wrap them around your grapevine base. But what I find is best if you're working with other plant material on your wreath is if you just come in and you're going to, can you see how this, the nature of this hop vine, there'll be a branch on the branch here. So I go in with my scissors and I just cut that right there, sort of like your deadhead and flowers. And what you've got is a little, I don't know what you call it, but it's perfect for this. Now the nature of the grapevine wreath is great because what I'm going to do is I'm not going to glue this or wire this. I'm just going to start tucking, and we're going to tuck all this on this wreath. And again, you just come back, cut that. I'm going to cut the stem off a little bit. And wherever it looks like it's going to need some green. Now the thing to do whenever you're making a wreath with fresh material like this is that you almost want the wreath almost double the size of what you want it to be when you're done, because you have to remember as this plant material dries, it's going to shrink down and wilt a little bit. So you want it to look really, really, really full when you're making it when it's fresh like this. So as it dries, it'll look full enough. This hops does have a tendency for taking everything over in the garden, so you have to, it's not one that you have trouble keeping contained, but you just have to be consistent about going out there. The stem's too long. Consistent about going out there and really watching the ground, because it sends runners out in the soil as well as in the top. Okay, I think I've got enough hops in there. There's really not much more to do on the wreath. As you can see, it's nice and full. I might come back maybe tomorrow after it started to dry, and I might have to snip out a few of these leaves that I don't like, that are covering up a little bit more of the lavender than I like. This wreath that I have here, I did last night. So you can see how the hops is drying up, and it was as full as this fresh one, and you can see what I mean about how the leaves kind of shrivel and dry up. So you really want it to be nice and full to start with, so as it dries, it'll still look full. Again, the lavender and hops Sweet Dream Wreath. It'll help you sleep better, and if nothing else, it'll make you enjoy your garden more.